I'll just get right down to it. Like, is Polkadot an ETH killer?
The whole point of Polkadot was a bet against blockchain maximalism, right? And that's why they designed it the way they did.
Ethereum is a layer one, Bitcoin is a layer one. Polkadot doesn't do any of those things. It just secures those networks.
All right, everyone, welcome back. We are having another great episode of CoinTalk here. I've got some awesome guests on with me today. I've got Dan Reeser, Peter from Parity, Alex Atuman, and as always, the bright and beautiful Wesley. I'll be stepping in for Zach this week. My name is Josh. I'm a community manager at Celsius. And I think I'll kick things off with Dan. Dan, give us a little bit about your background and how you found Polkadot or how you're related to Polkadot.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on. It's good to be here. Currently working as VP of Growth at a team called Akala, or the Akala Foundation. We've got two primary projects that we're kind of leading right now. So the Acala network is a DeFi platform that's going to launch on Polkadot as soon as we can. And then we have a network called Karura that's already launched on Kusama, beginning to roll out all of our kind of DeFi products. Prior to moving to Acala February 1st, I was at Web3 Foundation, which is one of the two organizations that Gavin Wood created to kind of foster the Polkadot and Kusama projects. The other one being Parity, where Peter is. So was at Web3 Foundation for a year and a half, working on growth and community there for Polkadot and Kusama. And you asked what led me to Polkadot. I was at another interoperability project prior to Polkadot. But just as I was looking at kind of where everything was headed, I wanted to be in kind of what I thought was the project that was going to be the ultimate winner in this interoperability and kind of multi-chain, next step of things. So that's kind of what led me to looking at jobs at Polkadot.
Very nice. Peter, I'll move on to you. I know you're with Parity. If you could just give us a little bit about your background and how you ended up there.
Sure thing. So my name is Peter Morick, head of public affairs at Parity Technologies. Been with Parity for almost 4 years now. Previously, I was a public affairs and political consultant here in New York City, doing all kinds of stuff like large-scale energy infrastructure, medical marijuana reform, advocacy work like that. And towards the end of my time there, my last job, I became the guy who knew about crypto. And through some investors that I knew here in New York, got connected with Gav and Jutta and the Parity team, and figured there was no better place I could end up than working with Gav and the team, both in the earlier days in the Ethereum community, and then more recently in the past couple of years, focused primarily on positioning and adoption of Polkadot.
Very cool. Alex, we'll close things off with you. Give us a little bit about your background and your correlation to Polkadot.
Sure. So I am basically a Polkadot ambassador. I also co-founded the group on Clubhouse and Twitter Space and stuff called Polka House. It's a community of Polkadot and Kusama aficionados, and we get together and talk all things Polkadot and Kusama, bring projects on to talk to the community. We think it's really important for everyone that is invested in or interested in Polkadot or Kusama to really have a chance to talk to the team members building on the platform. So that's what I've been doing.
Awesome, and that's how you and I met on Clubhouse. Thanks again for helping set this up. I do appreciate it. So I think Polkadot is one of the most complicated projects in the crypto space. If there is a simple way to put it, if that is possible, I'll start with you, Dan. To the layman, try to speak to our community and just like lay Polkadot out like in the simplest way you could.
Okay. I'll do my best. Yeah, it's hard. So over the last couple of years, I've been working on how to communicate this to non-technical people. And I just did a presentation at ECC last week, and like the first slide about what Polkadot is that it does two things. When it really comes down to it and you're simplifying down to the core, it connects blockchains together and it secures blockchains. So you can't build applications on Polkadot like you can on Ethereum or other networks. You have to build blockchains that connect to Polkadot, and then you can build applications on those. So we've called it, over the years, we've started calling it more and more this meta protocol. It's basically a multi-chain network connecting up to 100, potentially more blockchains. And these blockchains that connect to Polkadot are called parachains. There's a lot of kind of jargon that you need to learn once you get kind of deeper into this space, but that's ultimately what it is. It connects blockchains, or it connects parachains together, and it secures these parachains. Because Polkadot is a proof of stake network, which is where ETH2 is trying to head. We've had proof of stake live for, I think, about a year now on Polkadot. And Polkadot is run by these validators. So there's now, I believe, around 100 or 250 validators that are securing Polkadot itself. But one of the biggest reasons why teams like Akala chose to build in this Polkadot ecosystem is that as a blockchain team, building this layer one chain that's connecting to Polkadot, we as a parachain team don't have to go out and recruit our own set of validators to secure and validate our network. All we do is connect to Polkadot, and then the existing infrastructure of Polkadot's validator network secures our blockchain without us having to do anything. So that's a kind of, I guess, intro. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I had a quick question for you, Dan. I think one of the biggest value propositions of DOT is its governance structure, and also its parachain election process with regards to the bonding. Could you go a little bit more in depth for the community in terms of how that sort of differentiates between other cryptocurrencies and blockchains?
Yeah, Peter is probably better on the governance topic. I know high level, but you mentioned the parachain kind of bonding process, and this is a process that we just went through for the network that I mentioned, Karura, that just launched on Kusama. We can go into Kusama maybe next. That might be helpful too. But let's just say for Polkadot, I was mentioning that Polkadot offers interoperability and security from Polkadot by connecting to Polkadot, but it's not completely open where anyone can just build a blockchain and connect to Polkadot. There's actually kind of a process that you have to go through called parachain slot auctions. So if you think about it kind of like a parking spot, you have to actually win a spot or pay for a spot on the network in order to get these benefits of Polkadot. And unlike ICOs that we saw over the past 3 to 5 years, where anyone could just print tokens, sell the tokens, and they may or may not deliver on their promise that they made in their white paper, it led to a lot of scams and problems. So because Gavin was the one who built Ethereum and learned a lot from those lessons over the years, I believe that's kind of partially what led to this new structure of parachain slot auctions, which removes this potential for, or I guess removes most of the potential for teams to potentially scam, because there's a lot of effort that has to go into this process. And what it is it's an auction among teams. So for example, Akala, where I'm working, there's others like Moonbeam and Fala and Plasm. These are all teams that have been building their blockchains for 1-2+ years, and we all want to launch on Polkadot. But when Polkadot auctions begin, probably hopefully by the end of the year, we don't know exactly when yet, but when Polkadot auctions launch, this first auction will go live, and there will be multiple blockchain teams bidding in an auction to win that first slot. Whoever wins the first slot on Polkadot will have the right to launch, and then we can launch. Hopefully Akala wins the first slot, and then we'll be able to start launching our DeFi applications and everything on top of that. Before you win an auction, there's actually you can't actually run applications or blockchains on Polkadot.
Yeah, awesome. And then as I can go a little bit into the governance side of the question, but then as Dan was mentioning, Polkadot is very much like this layer 0. It's a layer below what most people are familiar with in blockchains today, right? Like Ethereum is a layer 1, Bitcoin is a layer 1. Polkadot doesn't do any of those things. It just secures those networks. So then once those layer 1 parachains are connected to Polkadot, then those application developers in the Ethereum world, these would be like Solidity developers. In Polkadot, there's a wider range of options available for application developers to actually then build multi-chain applications on top of these parachains once they secure their slot. So it's not as if everyone who wants to build a project on Polkadot has to be a parachain and go through this process to get a slot. Once a core infrastructure parachain like Akala or Moonbeam has their slot, anyone can come build permissionlessly on that layer one, similar to how you would on Ethereum today.
Yeah, and can you explain, just a quick question, Peter, on that topic. How does that differentiate between the parathreads as well? Yeah,
so if this is another economic model for attaching a full-blown layer one blockchain to Polkadot. There's a lot of applications. Let's use something like Akala as an example versus something like an Oracle, right? Akala is a DeFi primitive network. It's got a stable coin, it's got a DEX, it's got all these things that people around the world are going to want to access and trade on and use 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's going to be a lot of volume going through it at all times, right? You're obviously going to want to have the full power of a parachain in that case, because you're going to need to be signing transactions to the relay chain, syncing with the relay chain constantly. Something like an Oracle that is providing weather data to the chain, maybe weather data that is used in Akala for in some DeFi marketplace, or potentially in a prediction market, you really only need to sync to the chain maybe once an hour or maybe once or twice a day. You don't need to buy into 24-hour-a-day security the way a parachain does. Instead, as a parathread, you can have your optimized layer one blockchain, but just pay as you go every time you need to sync to Polkadot. So similar to like a gas model in Ethereum, it's like a smart contract. You pay gas, except you have a whole blockchain powering that functionality.
So I'll just get right down to it. Like, is Polkadot an ETH killer?
I would say no. I would say that Gav and the core team still have quite a lot of love in their hearts for Ethereum. And Gav has said this before when he was designing Ethereum designing Polkadot, that he has great hopes that it will be a good companion to Ethereum 2 should Ethereum 2 achieve this general sharded or general purpose sharded smart contract network. Sort of like a very big sandbox, and then Polkadot will fill in sort of both provide that connective tissue between all the blockchains. Like right now, there is no trustless Bitcoin, fully trustless Bitcoin on Ethereum. There are no networks that are fully connecting all the major crypto economic networks that are out there today. So sort of regardless of ETH2's ultimate destination or Polkadot, I think there will absolutely be a lot of synergies between the two networks, because we are looking at things like being fully interoperable first. It's always been one of the core value propositions of Polkadot, and for the last couple of years, we haven't seen fully trustless asset transfer between all the major networks yet, and it's something we've been committed to delivering with Polkadot from the start.
And if I am correct, Peter and Daniel, you can speak to this point as well. I believe, Gavin Wood, the whole point of Polkadot was a bet against blockchain maximalism, right? And exactly. That's why they designed it the way they did. And in fact, part of the value proposition is sort of these heterogeneous blockchains that all port in, meaning you can still have sort of the functionality with regards to, designing it to the way it would work best for your particular application or ecosystem that you're building out. Obviously, with Akala, it appears that you guys are a much broader ecosystem with regards to decentralized finance. My question to you, Daniel, directly is with regards to the DeFi products that are being built on the Akala network. How does it sort of differentiate, obviously, some of the low-cost value proposition that we see sort of people going away from Ethereum, but Polkadot has sort of a more decentralized infrastructure and model built around it. So what are the key value propositions for the decentralized finance application like Akala that's built on Polkadot?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, as you mentioned, with the heterogeneous sharding, it's a very complicated way of just saying that each of these blockchains can be built and customized for specific use cases. So, Polkadot is definitely betting on future blockchains customizing down to, say, it's whether it's DeFi or whether it's optimizing for privacy or whether it's optimizing for identity. We at Akala, we chose to optimize the blockchain for DeFi, and I'll explain how we did that. In terms of the value proposition of Akala, there's a few things. So Peter mentioned a couple of our core products, but we have Akala Swap. It's an AMM style DEX similar to Uniswap. The Acala Dollar, it's a stablecoin, multi-collateral crypto-backed stablecoin similar to DAI. And then we have something that I'm probably most excited about, which is liquid DOT staking. So right now there's, depending on price, there's usually, I think right now about $10 to $15 billion in DOT that's staked right now. And when you stake DOT, whether it's on an exchange or hopefully you're on Polkadot.js or a more decentralized option, when you stake that, it's locked away and you can't actually use it for anything. It's just basically sitting there. So when we launch Liquid DOT or LDOT, people will be able to stake their DOT through Akala and get a liquid form back in what's called LDOT. So your underlying DOT is staked, earning return still, and then you get this LDOT that you can go out and use within DeFi. So you could use it to maybe mint some stable coins and provide liquidity in the DEX and earn additional returns as a liquidity provider using what would have been previously locked away in your staked DOT. So those are our three core products. One major differentiator is that when you go to apps.akala.network, this is live on testnet right now, or you can see it on our Kusama-based network, Karura, which is actually live on mainnet now at apps.karura.network, Karura. It's basically like an all-in-one, like one-stop shop for DeFi. So instead of previously in DeFi, you had to go to like Uniswap site and then hop over to Compound, hop over to Synthetics, and it's all kind of, separate kind of locations. With this, you can kind of do everything in one place, which is very nice for the end user. For developers or even some end user benefits that we were able to build into the blockchain, this is an example of when I said how we were able to customize the blockchain for DeFi. So a couple examples of this. Number one, we were able to build what we're calling bring your own gas. So we were able to customize at the blockchain layer that if you bring in, say you bring in wrapped ETH through a bridge, there's a team called Snowfork building a trustless Ethereum bridge. Say I bring wrapped ETH over to Akala, and it's the first time I've ever been on Akala. So I have a wallet in Polkadot.js, which is the extension that everyone uses, and I would have wrapped ETH in my wallet. That very first transaction that I would make on Akala, say I'm swapping ETH for ACA or ETH for DOT, that initial transaction I can pay with the wrapped ETH that I have. I don't have to go out and figure out what ACA is and buy it and transfer it in. So that's a way that we were able to customize for DeFi. Another thing that's a little bit more technical is something called an automatic on-chain scheduler. So if you think about like payment use cases, developers can now build in an automatic scheduler that's on-chain. Previously with teams like Maker, they were using APIs and kind of off-chain services to do scheduling of transactions. So if you're thinking about like monthly payments or even like a Web3 version of Stripe, this is a way that could become helpful. So that's a brief explanation.
Very powerful. And Daniel, just to the liquid DOT, is it sort of like borrowing against the collateral? And is there like a set amount to which that liquidates, or how does that process work with regards to that ecosystem? If say the value of DOT were to come down, is there a threshold, like a 50% loan to value, or how does that exactly work? Or is that not the case?
Yeah, so liquid DOT will, I guess liquid KSM is what we're waiting on launching right now for Karura. What it essentially looks like is just staking. So even in the app, it'll say like stake. And let's go back to, you were asking about DOT. So if I stake DOT, it'll tell me how much LDOT I get in return. And then as soon as I stake, my DOT is staked. You will be able to select validators if you want. If not, it's going into this big kind of meta staking pool that the Acala protocol itself is managing. So the protocol itself will then distribute those staked dots to the existing set of validators. And then with that LDOT receipt, one cool thing is that since it's a receipt that's kind of mirroring your underlying staked dot, that account, if you can imagine, you open up your acala.apps.network or apps.acala.network and you check your wallet, that LDOT balance is going to always be going up. You may have seen it on other websites. I know Coinbase had this like constantly showing your staking returns every second going up. It's the same kind of idea where your LDOT will always be going up because your underlying stake dot is continuing to earn rewards. And then based on the price, it's more so just if you want to get your original dot back, you have to have the same amount of LDOT to redeem for the amount of dot. The stable coin is more dependent on like collateralization ratios and liquidations and things like that, which is a different topic. But yeah, that's generally how it works.
Awesome. Thanks for that explanation.
Yep.
So you guys, I realize you don't think you're probably talking so complex, but to the average individual who's watching this might sound extremely complex. In the future, do you see this being like really user friendly for like the average person, or do you see this as something that just enterprise is going to plug into and take advantage of? Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so we're obviously very early days for all proof of stake networks. And like you mentioned at the top, Josh, Polkadot is very complex. And I often say it is order of magnitude more complex than the next closest protocol, which I think would probably be Ethereum 2, which is also very hard to keep up with because the roadmap shifts and changes so often. The short answer is yes, and there's a number of different projects that are making this easier and more user-friendly. I personally believe Polkadot.js is the greatest website in the history of the world, but I am quite in the weeds and understand how to use it, and I can tap a dev to ask a question when I'm setting up my staking. So yes, there's a number of teams setting up more user-friendly staking and just network operations interfaces. In the future, right, if you're a DOT holder or a KSM holder, there's going to be likely increasingly more sort of proxying of network operations, or like trustless proxying, non-custodial proxying of network operations, where you can proxy your staking management to someone who's really just on the ball and understands what they're looking at. You can proxy your votes and governance to someone you trust to represent the same point of view on where Polkadot or Akala should go, and proxy your votes. So that'll also make things a lot easier for like the average person who's interacting with Polkadot but isn't necessarily a day-to-day network participant like Dan and I. And then the sort of, I guess, immediate easier way to go about getting the most out of all these network operations, if you don't have the time to really focus on what validators you're nominating and making sure they're good quality and checking out like what their commissions are and all the rest. There are several custodied solutions. Kraken, for example, runs staking on the exchange for users, and it's a very seamless process for folks that don't feel confident to get really deep into the technical weeds, but still engage with the network like the rest of us.
One of the key value propositions that I've heard communicated quite a bit, obviously Gavin is someone that is highly respected in the industry, was that they built out a lot of SDKs or modules for developers. And obviously, if you could speak to that point, obviously one of the key value propositions is, sometimes developing on the blockchain itself can be extraordinarily complex. It's a little bit different than the languages of just traditional programming. So how, if you could speak to the point, just how much has been built out on that end in terms of SDKs and modules to make it easier for developers to actually launch different applications on Polkadot and so forth.
Yeah, so I just spoke about this earlier today at Chainlink's conference. We started out building Polkadot in 2016, I believe, was the first commits by Rob, and coded for almost a year plus before deciding to split out the Polkadot protocol from Substrate, which we have sort of split out as its own product, this blockchain building framework or SDK, like you said, because we realized, Gavri and the core development team realized that we've got a ways to go on actually delivering Polkadot, and if Polkadot is going to be successful, we need a really good blockchain building framework so people can build parachains. And this has meant that hundreds of teams around the world have been able to use everything that Gav and the team has learned since building Ethereum in a nice developer-friendly box to build these custom chains like Akala, optimized for DeFi, like Moonbeam, optimized for EVM-compatible smart contracts. They have all this tech ready to go well before Polkadot ever launched, which is really exciting. You see sort of like Cardano going the opposite direction where no one can really build anything. And then they're going to eventually one day get the smart contracts and then the building will start. We've had teams like Akala now building for 2 or 3 years. And it's also led to really excellent opportunity for community building, right? Because all of these parachains are their own layer 1 networks, their own layer 1 communities. And I think Alex has been on the front line of seeing that community development, running the Polka House Clubhouse room. Like, imagine if we didn't have teams to talk to, Alex.
Awesome, fantastic. Thank you for that thorough answer, Peter.
I'm going to pivot to Alex. Alex, I don't want you to think that we forgot about you, buddy. Before I do that, are there any like secret weapon projects or anything you feel like we didn't cover, anything you'd want to share, or any gems you'd like to drop?
I wanted to add one thing that's just an interesting trend, I think, not only for the Polkadot ecosystem, but for crypto in general. When you mentioned the user experience, I think we're still years away from getting to the point of like the ease of using Venmo in the US or a banking app. But one thing that's starting to happen is this merging of these neobanks or these fintech companies with crypto to a point where you can actually have DeFi returns being generated for these fintech companies in the background where their customers don't have any idea that they're even interacting with DeFi. They just get to enjoy the returns. So an example of this, there's a company that is based in the US. It's a fintech application called Current. If you ever go to New York, they're plastered all over the subways. They're based in New York and actually had roots in crypto. Super interesting story. Started, funny enough, trying to build on Ripple, realized that wasn't going to work. And then they got together and they were thinking, okay, how do we get crypto in the hands of millions of people? Well, back in 2015 or so, the answer wasn't to go to crypto. The answer was to create a fintech company. So they launched Current. It's basically like a savings account app for younger people, millennials. They've got about 3 million customers now in the US. And now fast forward to about, what was it, Peter, maybe 2016, 2017, when the Polkadot white paper came out. Trevor, their CTO, saw that and then had an eye on Polkadot as their kind of ultimate goal. And then when Akala came out, he started to see what we were doing. He approached us and said, we want to build a DeFi backend with the Current front end. So they're going to be bringing their 3 million customers to a new product within their app. They won't have any really need to know that there's crypto going on, but what's going to happen in the background is dollars will be going in and out of dollars into stable coins, and then that will be going into Akala to earn DeFi yield through this yield engine that we're building. And then that will flow back to the customers at whatever they want to brand the product as. It's not been finalized yet, and whatever the kind of percent return is. But this is similar to what we're seeing with Compound. Compound just released Compound Treasury, 4% yield. Coinbase, same thing. They're offering these yield products. So I think but before we get full on kind of mainstream, this is what's looking like will be the next kind of trend over the next couple of years in DeFi.
Very nice. I look forward to when DeFi gets fully up and operational. Look forward to using it. Alex, I'm going to end the show off with you. Over at Celsius, we have our community is called the Celsians, and they're our own version of cyber hornets, and their job is to go out and educate people, speak to the layperson and get them up to speed on how Celsius works. I met you on Clubhouse, and your rooms were just as big as mine, if not bigger a lot of times, and you seem to have a huge following as well. Like, can you tell us a little bit about the community and how they function and how excited they are and maybe what they're called?
Sure. There are several communities in and around Polkadot and Kusama that have their own names. The one we run is just Polka House. I think a lot of this boils down to how complex Polkadot is, and a lot of people coming into our rooms to just get that information and learn about how to actually interact with Polkadot. So a lot of what we do is essentially what we've done today is just explain the complexity of what Polkadot is and how to interact with it. Peter says he loves the Polkadot.js website, but I can tell you it's the number one complaint we get over at Polka House. So we scheduled.
Same here.
Yeah. So we scheduled something we call Wallet Wednesdays, where we just walk people through how to interact with Polkadot.js. Now, once people do learn about Polkadot and Kusama, though, I think there is this almost like a bond that gets formed between the people in the Polkadot community, because it is such a complex system. But once you understand it, you really do value what it stands for. I mean, I've had countless what you could consider Bitcoin maxis or just OG Bitcoiners learn about Polkadot and actually like what Polkadot stands for and what Polkadot is trying to do. I think that's unique because it's a protocol that's attempting to connect all the blockchains together. And if you believe the future is multi-chain, which I personally do, there are just a handful of projects attempting to do it. And as Dan said earlier, I think Polkadot's the one doing it in the best way.
Thank you for that, and kudos to you for convincing some Bitcoin maxis. You must be like the only person in crypto capable of doing that. Guys, I'm gonna close out the show. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules. A lot to absorb here, a lot to think over, and I appreciate all you guys coming on CoinTalk and hope to have you on again in the future.
Certainly. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.